How do you feel when you see a police car in your rearview mirror?
He unzipped his pants, took a jet onto out. He said, okay, come on. And I said, oh, sir, please don't make me do this.
Do you recall putting your in her mouth?
I don't.
Do you feel safe and protected, or do you feel nervous and anxious?
How about this, son?
That is not mine. No, sir.
Well, depending on where you live and who you are, your answer might be different. However, in some places, the police are not your friends, but your enemies.
Newly released videos show the officers pretending to open a safe for the first time.
Hey, Sarge! Hey, come downstairs right quick. They're about to get it open.
But in fact, prosecutors say they'd already gotten in, took $100,000 for themselves, then pretended this was the first time they'd laid eyes on the cash.
So in this video today, we will explore the dark and disturbing stories of some of the most corrupt cops in history who were put in jail for the most horrible crimes. Number 1. Wayne Jenkins.
Look at me. I'm Sergeant Wayne Jenkins of Gun Trace Task Force. I'm assigned to Baltimore City Police Department. I don't care. This is on camera, dum-dum. Come on, let's get away from it, because people are so ignorant.
That was former Sergeant Wayne Jenkins and his team. The team that was responsible for taking guns and narcotics off the streets, but ended up supplying more guns and narcotics to the streets than any other criminal organization in Baltimore. Wayne Jenkins joined the Baltimore Police Department in 2003 after serving in the U.S. Marine Corps for 3 years. Now in the police department, Jenkins was assigned to the Gun Trace Task Force, or GTTF, a plainclothes unit that targeted suspected criminals with large supplies of guns and narcotics. While heading this team, Jenkins was seen as a golden boy by his superiors, who praised him for his high arrest numbers and his aggressive tactics. He even received several awards and commendations, including the Medal of Honor, which happens to be the department's highest honor, for saving the life of a fellow officer who was injured in the line of duty. But behind the scenes, Jenkins and his team of GTTF officers were running a criminal enterprise of their own. These guys would routinely stop people without probable cause, search their homes and cars without warrants, and steal money, narcotics, and guns from them. They would then resell the illegal substances and guns on the street, pocketing the profits. They would also plant evidence on innocent people, falsify reports and overtime claims, and lie under oath to get convictions for innocent people. On several occasions, these guys committed home invasions, breaking into people's houses and robbing them at gunpoint. You see, Jenkins and his team were able to get away with their crimes for years because they had the protection and the trust of the police department. They also had informants and contacts in the criminal underworld who helped them find their targets and cover their tracks. Jenkins was so confident and arrogant that he even bragged about his exploits to other officers and invited them to join his scheme. Some of them did, while others turned a blind eye or reported him to internal affairs. But nothing seemed to stop Jenkins and his crew, who continued to terrorize the streets of Baltimore. But that was until the FBI stepped in. In 2015, the FBI launched a 2-year investigation into the GTTF after receiving tips from several sources, including a disgruntled officer who had recorded Jenkins talking about his crimes.
Well, how about we just go on scene and just act like, oh, is everything okay? You get what I'm saying?
The FBI wiretapped Jenkins and his team's phones, tracked their movements, and gathered evidence from their victims and witnesses. And it all came crashing down in March 2017, when the FBI arrested Jenkins and 6 other GTTF officers and charged them with racketeering, robbery, and civil rights violations. They also recovered hundreds of thousands of dollars, several pounds of illegal substances, and several firearms that Jenkins and his team had stolen.
A sledgehammer, grappling hook, even a machete. For the first time, the public is getting a look at weapons former members of the Gun Trace Task Force used to intimidate citizens and steal stacks of cash and personal items.
While his case went on trial, Jenkins initially pleaded not guilty and claimed that he was a good cop who was just doing his job. But as the evidence against him mounted, he changed his plea to guilty and admitted to his crimes. He also implicated other officers who were involved in his scheme and revealed that he had been stealing and selling illegal substances since 2010, when he first planted narcotics on 2 men who were later sentenced to prison. Following his conviction in June 2018 alongside 6 other GTTF officers, Jenkins was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without a possibility for parole.
The former head of the corrupt Baltimore Police Gun Trace Task Force wept and apologized for crimes that prosecutors say included at least 10 armed robberies, planting evidence, falsifying overtime, and selling $1 million worth of drugs.
He is currently serving his time at a federal prison in Kentucky, where he has been interviewed by several journalists and authors. In one of those interviews with a BBC journalist, Jenkins said that whatever he did was just to give his children a good life and that he did not live a frivolous lifestyle with the fortune he made from crimes.
I was using the money to take care of my family. I don't have expensive cars or clothes or houses. We went on vacation. My kids had the clothes they wanted. And we wasn't living extravagant at all, but I could go out to Applebee's and Fridays every day. We could go to the movies twice a week. My kids wanted new cleats, they got them. New baseball bats, they got them. So I kind of was putting a lot of it back into the children. But I did it because it just made me give my children a better life, and I'm wrong for that.
Now that's so very selfish and evil of Jenkins to have cared only about his own children and family. How about the families of those innocent people he put in jail with false evidence? Or the countless lives that were destroyed with the guns and illegal substances he sold back to the streets? Obviously, Jenkins didn't care about any of those. He was just hell-bent on giving his family a good life that his police salary could not afford, even though that meant destroying other people's lives in the process. Number 2. Michael Dotro. Michael Dotro was a 35-year-old former cop who worked for the Edison Police Department in New Jersey. He had a history of misconduct and violence, both on and off duty. He was accused of tormenting suspects, falsifying reports, stealing narcotics, and even firing at a car during a road rage incident. He was also involved in a bitter divorce with his wife, who called him a monster in court. But the most heinous crime that Dotro committed was on May 23, 2013, when he decided to take revenge on his supervisor, Captain Mark Anderko, who had recently disciplined him for failing to report an arrest. Dotro drove to Anderko's home in Monroe Township, where he lived with his wife, children, and 92-year-old mother. Dotro then poured gasoline around the house and set it on fire, hoping to kill everyone inside. Fortunately, Anderko and his family were able to escape the burning house, but they suffered from smoke inhalation and emotional trauma. The fire also caused significant damage to the property. In another similar incident, Dotro tried to burn down the house of another officer whom he saw as a competition in the department, but his criminal behavior did not stop there, as he also had a case of stalking and harassing his ex-girlfriend, who had broken up with him because of his violence nature and lifestyle. To get back at her, Dotro made false police reports about her, installed a tracking device on her car, and even threatened to kill her. However, his reign of terror came to an end in 2017 when he was arrested and charged with 5 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated arson, official misconduct, conspiracy, and tampering with a witness. When his case went on trial, Dotro pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit official misconduct and 1 count of arson, while the other charges against him were dropped by the prosecutors in exchange for his pleas. He was eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison and can only be eligible for parole after 17 years.
What he's really done, and what we're going to be left with after he's walking out the door to spend the next third of his life in prison, is allow people a basis to say that our system of justice has no integrity.
Number 3. Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel Holtzclaw is one of the most corrupt and evil cops who was put in jail for the most horrible crimes against women.
He was escalating in his numbers. His last day, he assaulted 3 women. He did it 3 times. 3 different victims in one shift. And they were all horrible assaults. They were beyond fondling.
Daniel Holtzclaw was born in 1986 in Guam to a German-American father and a Japanese mother. His father was a lieutenant with the police department in Enid, Oklahoma, and Daniel followed in his footsteps by joining the Oklahoma City Police Department in 2011. He graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a degree in criminal justice, and he was also a former college football player who tried to get drafted into the NFL. But behind his seemingly respectable and athletic image, Holtzclaw was a predator who abused his power and authority to prey on vulnerable African-American women, whom he targeted from a poorer, majority-black portion of the city. He ran background checks to find information that could be used to coerce them into getting down with him, such as their criminal records, narcotics use, or outstanding warrants. Once he found something on them, he would stop them on the street, in their cars, or at their homes, and threaten them with arrest or violence if they did not comply with his dirty demands. He would also force them to pleasure him with their mouth and forcefully have his way with them, sometimes in his patrol car, sometimes in secluded areas, and other times in front of their children or relatives. Holtzclaw's reign of terror lasted for about 6 months, from December 2013 to June 2014. during which he had his way with 13 women, ranging in age from 17 to 58. But his downfall came when one of his victims, a 57-year-old grandmother named Janny Ligens, reported him to the police after he forcefully had his way with her during a traffic stop.
He unzipped his pants, took his genitals out. He said, okay, come on. And I said, oh, sir, please don't make me do this, sir. Don't make me do this, sir. He said, come on, I don't got all night. All this time I'm looking at the gun.
The woman was able to give a detailed description of Holtzclaw and his car, and Holtzclaw DNA was also found on her clothes. When the police launched an investigation into the case, they found more DNA evidence on Holtzclaw's uniform pants, which matched one of his other victims, a 17-year-old girl whom he had slept with, on her mother's porch. They also identified 11 more women who had similar stories of Holtzclaw's torment and abuse. With enough evidence against him, Holtzclaw was arrested in August 2014 and his trial began in November 2015. Holtzclaw's trial was a media sensation as it exposed the shocking and disturbing details of his crimes. The prosecution presented the testimonies of the 13 women who bravely faced their abuser in court and the DNA evidence that linked Holtzclaw to 6 of his victims. But the defense tried to discredit the women by questioning their credibility, bringing up their criminal records, and suggesting that whatever they had with Holtzclaw was consensual. So, Holtzclaw pleaded not guilty to all charges, and he maintained his innocence throughout the trial.
Do you recall putting your in her mouth?
I don't.
Would you recall that if you did it?
If I did, yeah.
But on December 10, 2015, Holtzclaw was convicted on 18 of 36 charges, involving 8 different women, while he was acquitted on the remaining 18 charges, involving 5 other women. On January 21, 2016, he was sentenced to 263 years in prison, the maximum possible sentence, and he was ordered to serve his sentences consecutively. He is currently incarcerated at the Lexington Assessment and Reception Center, a maximum security prison in Oklahoma. However, Holtzclaw has not given up on his fight to clear his name, and he has appealed his conviction several times, claiming that he was wrongfully convicted based on flawed forensic science, a biased and incompetent investigation, prosecutorial misconduct, and ineffective assistance of trial counsel. However, his appeals have been denied by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, which upheld both his convictions and prison sentence in 2019, and by the Supreme Court of the United States, which refused to hear his case in 2020. Number 4. Zachary Wester.
To you, Mr. Wester, you've robbed me of my credibility being a mother and a grandmother for the last 3 years. I've probably missed 1.5 years of my grandbaby's life because of this. I wish you no ill will, and you'll never know what you've done to me until you have children of your own. So.
Zachary Wester was a 26-year-old former deputy with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office in Florida who was put in jail for the most horrible crimes like planting narcotics on innocent motorists during traffic stops and arresting them to ruin their lives.
And he was sentenced to 12 years and 6 months in prison.
When Wester joined the police force in 2016, he quickly gained a reputation as a hardworking and ambitious officer. But behind his seemingly professional demeanor, he was hiding a dark and sinister secret. Wester was actually planting illegal substances on unsuspecting drivers, mostly amphetamine, and arresting them on false charges. He would then falsify his reports and claim that he found the illegal substances during a search of their vehicles or belongings, and to conceal his actions, Wester would also tamper with his body camera footage. One of his victims was Teresa Odom, a 50-year-old grandmother who was pulled over by Wester in February 2018 for a faulty brake light. Wester asked her to step out of her truck and searched it without her consent. He then came back with a plastic baggie containing a white substance and asked her if it was hers. Teresa was shocked and denied any knowledge of the controlled substances. She begged Wester to test the substance, but he refused and then arrested her on charges of possession of amphetamine, a felony that could land her in prison for up to 5 years. Teresa's life was turned upside down by the arrest. She lost her job, her home, and her reputation. She also suffered from depression and anxiety, and even contemplated taking her own life. But Teresa was not the only one who fell victim to Wester's scheme. He targeted dozens of other drivers, mostly poor, young, or minorities, who had little power or resources to fight back. Some of them had prior criminal records or substance abuse issues, which made them even more vulnerable and less credible. After arresting and charging them, some of them pleaded guilty to avoid harsher sentences, while others spent months in jail awaiting trial. Wester's crimes went unnoticed for a long time until one of his colleagues, Light Mike Hodges, became suspicious of his high number of drug arrests. Hodges reviewed Wester's body camera footage and noticed several inconsistencies and irregularities.
A prosecutor noticed Wester's reports didn't match his body cam footage. Often, Wester would turn off his body camera and only have it on after he found drugs in people's cars, but he was really taking the time off camera to plant the drugs in the vehicle he pulled over.
It was also found that Wester had been carrying around unmarked evidence bags in his patrol car. Following his findings, Hodges reported the evidence to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which then launched an investigation into Wester's conduct. The investigation revealed that Wester had planted illegal substances on at least 120 people over a period of 2 years, and with this revelation, the state attorney's office dropped the charges against all of his victims and expunged their records. Wester was eventually arrested in July 2019 and charged with 52 counts of racketeering, official misconduct, perjury, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and possession of illegal substances and paraphernalia. He pleaded not guilty and maintained his innocence throughout his trial, which took place in May 2021.
Did you plant that syringe in Mr. Emanuel's car?
I did not.
However, his defense was not convincing, as the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against him. The jury deliberated for more than 7 hours and found him guilty on 19 counts, involving 3 of his victims, while he was acquitted on the remaining 33 counts, involving 9 other victims.
The jury found Wester guilty on 19 out of 67 charges. He's been charged with racketeering, official misconduct, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, possession of controlled substances, in drug paraphernalia, and perjury.
Following his conviction, Wester was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. He is currently serving his time in a Colorado prison, where he was transferred for some undisclosed security reasons. Number 5. Dennis Perkins. Former Louisiana Sheriff's Deputy, Dennis Perkins and his wife Cynthia Perkins were involved in a series of horrific crimes, ranging from doing dirty things to children, production of explicit child content, and even contaminating food with bodily fluids.
He was a deputy with the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office who was raping children. He was downloading child pornography. His wife was a school teacher. He was ejaculating on pastries. She was serving them to her class.
They targeted children under the age of 13, some of whom they knew personally. They also filmed and photographed their depraved acts and shared them online with other predators. They even used Dennis Perkins' bodily fluids, I mean the one that is used to make babies, to season a cake batter, which Cynthia Perkins then baked and served to her students at school.
She also took those sweets that her husband had on and served them to her class.
Their crimes came to light in October 2019 when the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received a tip about an IP address linked to the Perkins' home. The authorities raided their house and seized thousands of videos and photos, showing the couple forcefully having their way with children, as well as the bodily fluids-laced cupcakes. They also found evidence of Perkins filming himself in the bathroom of a female colleague, and Perkins forcefully having his way with an unconscious woman. Following these horrifying discoveries, Perkins and his wife were arrested and charged with more than 70 counts each for all the dirty things they had done to children. They both pleaded not guilty at first and were held without bond. However, in 2023, they both changed their plea to guilty as part of a deal that would reduce their sentence. Eventually, Cynthia Perkins was sentenced to 41 years in prison, and Dennis Perkins was sentenced to 100 years in prison, without the possibility of parole, probation, or appeal. Number 6. Bralo Gonzalez. Bralo Gonzalez was a former lieutenant with the Miami-Dade Police Department, but also a monster who preyed on 2 young girls, one of whom was his own relative. He threatened them with a gun and then did dirty things to them for 2 years, starting from when they were only 8 years old. He faced 7 counts of doing dirty things to children and 1 count of kidnapping. For the night, he dragged one of the girls from her bed, where her siblings slept, to his bedroom, where he had his way with her. Gonzalez was arrested in 2018 after one of the brave survivors confided in her therapist. After some preliminary investigations, he was placed under house arrest, still receiving his salary from the department, until another victim came forward with her testimony. and that was when he was taken into custody before his trial. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Gonzalez denied his guilt, even after the jury found him guilty on all charges. However, the judge gave him a life sentence for his heinous crimes, but till 2023, Gonzalez is still appealing his conviction.
So at this time, based on the jury's findings, on every count, I'm sentencing you to life in prison. Count 1 will be a 10-year minimum mandatory. Counts 2 through 9 will have a 25-year minimum mandatory. Everything will run concurrent.
Police records showed that Gonzalez had a history of violence against women, dating back to before the charges that sealed his fate. 3 of his former girlfriends reported that he had severally assaulted them at gunpoint and inflicted serious injuries on them. Now, the strange thing is that his superiors knew about these incidents, but for some reason, they did nothing to stop him. He kept his job with the Miami-Dade police force until his evil deeds caught up with him. Number 7. Kenneth Blue.
Kenneth Blue sat stoic and emotionless as he received his sentence for murdering his pregnant girlfriend Jenny Webb and his unborn son.
I've never in my 30-year career seen a case like this one.
The community and the law enforcement of a small Michigan community were stunned by the crimes of Kenneth Blue, a former police officer who turned into a cold-blooded killer. He murdered Jennifer Webb, a 32-year-old pregnant woman who was carrying his child. You see, Kenneth was a married man, but he didn't exactly consider his marital status and family when he engaged in an extramarital affair that got him entangled with the lady, Jennifer Webb. When Jennifer got pregnant for Blue, he wanted to eliminate her and the child by every means possible, as a way to hide his affair from his wife and save his home. So, he lured her to a remote location under the pretext of talking about child support, but once Jennifer showed up, Blue brutally ended her life with a bullet to her head.
An evil monster is the only words that I can think of for you.
A passerby discovered Jennifer Webb's body and immediately alerted the authorities. After some preliminary investigations, the authorities soon identified Blue as the prime suspect and found various pieces of evidence that connected him to the crime scene. Moreover, a fellow inmate of Blue revealed that Blue had confessed to the murder while they were in jail. Blue's trial was a tense and dramatic affair during which the prosecution presented a strong case against Blue, showing DNA evidence that proved he was the father of Jennifer's unborn child. The defense tried to claim that Blue was mentally unstable and not responsible for his actions. However, the jury did not buy this argument and convicted him of first-degree murder. Blue received a life sentence without parole, a punishment that was meant to serve justice for Jennifer Webb and her family.
So go to your cage and think about how you squeezed the life and breath out of my daughter and grandson. And I hope it haunts you every day for the rest of your life.
Number 8. David Carrick. David Carrick was simply a monster in uniform, that's if I'm putting it very lightly. Carrick had joined the Metropolitan Police in 2001 after a brief career in the British Army. Now in the police force, he quickly rose to the rank of a sergeant, and in 2009 he was assigned to the elite parliamentary and diplomatic protection team, a team responsible for guarding the most powerful people in the country. But behind his badge and gun, he hid a dark and twisted secret. Carrick was a serial predator who preyed on vulnerable women he met online. Using dating apps like Badoo and Tinder, Carrick posed as a gentle and lured unsuspecting women into his web of lies and manipulation. Once they fell for his tactics, Carrick then used intimidation to control them, subjecting them to horrific acts of unspeakable violence. He would degrade them, torment them, and lock them up in small spaces. Despite multiple complaints against him in 2002, Carrick was never investigated or charged with any crime.
He should not have been a police officer. There were many signs that we should have joined together. He should have been rooted out during his career as a police officer.
However, in October 2021, a brave woman came forward and reported that Carrick had forcefully had his way with her. This woman was inspired by the tragic case of Sarah Everard, who was kidnapped, assaulted, and killed by another Metropolitan Police officer. Her courage sparked a wave of other women to speak out against Carrick, revealing his long history of crimes. Following their testimonies, Carrick was placed under arrest and suspended from duty while facing dozens of charges.
David,
Do you want me to come naked like this?
no, just understand you're under arrest,
No,
okay?
I'm under
Just
arrest.
explain to us, what do you need?
I'll pull that like this. Don't
Right,
worry about it.
can one of my colleagues go and get you stuff? Yeah. Okay, do you want to? Yeah.
Which one's yours?
At first, he denied everything, claiming he was innocent, but as the evidence mounted against him, he changed his plea to guilty, hoping for a lighter sentence. He admitted to 49 charges, including 24 counts of dirty assault involving 12 victims. He also confessed to 4 more charges at a later date. Carrick's conviction was a landmark moment that triggered a massive scandal in the Metropolitan Police, exposing their failure to protect the public and their own officers from abuse. In the end, he was given 36 life sentences, with a minimum term of 30 years plus 239 days. He would not be eligible for parole until 2052, when he would be 75 years old.
Also, 5 life sentences are imposed on the second indictment on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This makes a total of 36 life sentences. The minimum term you will have to serve before the parole board can think of releasing you is 30 years, 239 days, and you may go down.
Number 9. Wayne Couzens. Wayne Couzens had a twisted obsession with women, especially those who were young and vulnerable. He joined the Metropolitan Police in 2018 and was assigned to the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, the same command where David Carrick worked. While on duty, Couzens would target vulnerable women, abduct them, do dirty things to them, and then murder them. But his luck ran out in March of 2021 when he crossed paths with Sarah Everard, a 33-year-old marketing executive who lived in South London. Sarah had just visited a friend and was walking home on a cold and dark night when she was followed by Couzens, who pretended to be on a routine patrol. After following her for some distance, Couzens confronted Sarah, handcuffed her, and forced her into his car. He drove her to a remote location in Kent, where he had his way with her and murdered her before burning her body and disposing of her remains in a nearby pond. On March 9, 2021, Couzens was arrested after he was linked to Sarah's abduction.
So we're here to talk to you about Sarah. Show you a picture. Do you know Sarah?
I don't know.
Okay. Sarah went missing. I'll show you some pictures of her on the day.
Okay.
Sarah went missing on Wednesday. And her parents, obviously, and her family are really worried about her. The inquiry that's been conducted so far has led us to come and speak to you about it and to see what we know about Sarah, okay? So, would you like to, do you know where Sarah is?
No, at that point I had no option to try and find somebody. So, I don't, there's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know.
However, following the recovery of Sarah's body on March 10th, Couzens was charged with her kidnapping and murder. On June 8, 2021, Couzens pleaded guilty to all the charges against him, and on September 30th, 2021, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, meaning he would never be released. Number 10. Michael Valva. Michael Valva was a former cop in New York City who murdered his 8-year-old son Thomas by locking him in a freezing garage. This horrific case was exposed on January 17, 2020, when Valva called 911 and lied that Thomas had fallen and lost his breath.
Hi, do you need the police?
I need ambulance immediately. My son's not breathing.
Okay, stay on the line. Your son, who's not breathing, how old is he? How old is he?
8.
8?
Yes. He fell down, he banged his head.
Okay.
He's okay.
Okay.
I took him, I gave him a shower to try and help him out a little bit. Stop breathing.
Paramedics arrived shortly after and rushed Thomas to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead a few hours later. An autopsy report showed that the little boy had frozen to death, and his death was ruled as a homicide. Further police investigation revealed that Thomas and his older brother Anthony were constantly tormented by Valva and his fiancée, Angela Polina. The boys were constantly punished for wetting their bed by being forced to sleep in Valva's freezing garage. On January 16, 2020, Michael Valva and Angela once again forced Thomas and Anthony to sleep in the garage of their home in Center Moriches, Long Island. It was a cold winter night, and the temperature outside was 19 degrees Fahrenheit. The boys had to sleep on the concrete floor of that garage, wearing only their pajamas, and unfortunately that day, Thomas did not make it. Apart from tormenting these kids, Valva also exploited them to get disability benefits. His ex-wife, Justina Zubko Valva, had even warned Child Protective Services about Valva's abuse and neglect of their children, but for some reason Valva still kept custody of the children, even with the reports. However, Valva and his fiancée, Polina, were eventually arrested, and while the case went on trial, the prosecution tendered terrifying audio recordings of Valva and Polina mocking and tormenting Thomas as he gasped for air on the day of his death. Vala also said in that audio recording that he didn't care if Thomas lived or died. On March 25, 2021, Vala was sentenced to 40 years in prison after he was found guilty of second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child.
You could hear a pin drop.
Charging the defendant, Michael Vala, with the crime of murder in the second degree. Not guilty or guilty? Guilty.
Then a gasp. Guilty of murdering his 8-year-old autistic son, Thomas.
Polina was also found guilty of second-degree murder and got the same sentence as Vala. Who among these monsters do you think deserved a more severe punishment than what they got? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe.